Hey everybody, joining me in the Capitol View studio today is of course Congressman French Hill and Member of Parliament Rehman Chishti. We were last together back in October, which doesn't seem that long ago, but I know a lot has happened since then. First off, I just wanted you both to explain just why you were here this time around together in Little Rock, what you were able to do in Arkansas.
Well, my good friend Rehman was back in the United States for holiday during the Christmas holidays and paid us the great favor of returning to his now favorite capital city, I think, in America, which is Little Rock.
Okay.
It's the best, yeah.
Yeah, so what were you able to do while you were here
Well,
so far?
for me, it was great to come and see great friends over here. So I think one of the key things about, visiting different parts of the world is you build lasting friendships. So Mount Pinnacle, I climbed last time, and it was absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful again. And for me, it's also to see some of the work that we had started. So we went to the military academy at the Clinton Center recently, whilst I've been over here. So it's a continuation of the work that we've been doing, but also enjoy some Christmas time out with good friends, French and Martha. Right.
And then, yeah, it's good that you both are kind of enjoying some downtime right now because this is the calm before the storm for both of you.
Exactly.
I think it's very, very safe to say. So first, let's get off get into the government shutdown. So the government partially shut down before Christmas. That will continue into the new year. And now we're hearing that, on this last day of 2018, that House Democrats already have this plan together that they're going to try to vote on as early as Thursday when Congress reconvenes. And so it doesn't include funding for the president's border wall, but then in reading some different things this week too, it sounds like that the border wall, even though it's something the president campaigned on, I think I was trying to figure out who said that. Senator Lindsey Graham, he called the wall more of a metaphor even for border security.
Right.
So what do you think of the House Democrats' current plan? It does have funding for border security, not as much as he was hoping, but do you think this has a good chance?
Well, we have to wait and see what's in their package, but this has really been frustrating for me to have the shutdown over this. All year we had a good compromise on how to improve our immigration laws, including interior enforcement, resolving the Dreamer issue, and increase our funding for border security. And border security is more than the wall, as I hear my Democratic friends talk about. It's technology, it's radios, it's manpower, it's judges there for adjudication of cases on the border. I support all that. I've voted for it multiple times this year. But this issue of building the border fence or the physical barrier on the southwest border was an original proposal by Bill Clinton. It was a proposal during the George W. Bush administration. Both Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi have voted for this very type thing before. So I'm frustrated that we've made a big deal out of it. I really have, because we want good southwest border security. We want to improve our immigration system. So I appreciate Lindsey Graham trying to be a voice of reason to bring compromise in this year-end funding crisis connected to the southwest border. I hope when I get back to Washington, we can make progress.
So you think there could be a compromise? It's not like one side maybe has to surrender here?
And from what I understand, President Trump over the past week has offered a number of compromises on the dollar amount and the structure. We also in the House passed full funding of government. We passed not only this border security money that the president had requested, but money importantly for the hurricanes. We have farmers and people in Georgia, Panhandle of Florida, really hurting from the hurricanes, and they've not gotten the federal funding owed to them, particularly for our farmers who've got to put a crop in early. That's why I'm frustrated we haven't gotten this resolved.
And just from the outside looking in, how does Britain interpret what we've been doing and shutting down our government here in America?
Well, look, let me first talk about the issue of the border security. We have a similar issue back at home. And the first duty of the state, whether it's the United Kingdom or the United States, to protect your citizens and keep your borders secure. For us at the moment, United Kingdom, we have a real issue with migrant boats coming in from France onto the coast of Kent, near my district. And there's been real concern about the government's inadequacy to deal with that. Our French partners, from where these boats are coming in, are not doing what they should be doing. So I think when we see what's going on in the United States, saying they want to secure their borders, I think it's absolutely vital that all the key stakeholders, all the political parties work together to ensure that the appropriate action is taken. And we've seen that back at home. There's a difference of opinion, but I think amongst all politicians that accept the first duty of the state is to protect your citizens, and you've got to come together and protect and secure your borders.
Now, the partial shutdown could take up all of our time, but we got to get into something that's taking up a lot of your time in Britain too, and that's of course Brexit. Back in October, we were able to talk about kind of some preliminary work over a deal, and now we have the Brexit withdrawal treaty from Prime Minister Theresa May's negotiations with the EU. From what I was able to understand from you just now, it did that make you resign your position in her cabinet? Where are you at right now? Explain that to us.
Well, look, the first position we have to look at is how did we get to this position? What is Brexit? People talk about Brexit. What is Brexit? Brexit is that the government gave the people a choice to decide what kind of a relationship they wanted with our European partners. We were in the European Union, which we joined some 40 years ago for economic trade and relationships. But since then, it's taken shape in every aspect of people's life, encroached in that. And so therefore, the Conservative Party, David Cameron as the Prime Minister, said we will give the British public the choice to determine what kind of a relationship they want with the European Union. I love our European partners. Oh, you know, we're part of Europe, but I don't want to be part of the European Union. And I'll tell you why. Brexit, for many people, meant many things. And for some, it was about immigration. For some, it was about regulation. For some, it was about the British public electing their members of parliament. They have the final say in relation to how money is spent. And having British judges, you know, being the final arbiter on laws affecting British citizens. Sadly, by being in the European Union, that wasn't right. And look, do you know what? People in the United States would also be very cheesed off if they were part of a system where it wasn't the American judiciary having the final say on laws affecting American citizens, if it wasn't the American elected representatives having the final say on how taxpayers' money here is spent. They will be absolutely aggrieved by that, and the same thing back at home in the United Kingdom. So we had the referendum. It meant many things to many people, but for us in the Conservative Party, our manifesto said that we will be coming out of the single market, we'll be coming out of the customs union, and the British courts will have the final say on how legislation affects British people. Since then, since I was here in October, the Prime Minister has brought back the draft agreement, which is put to Parliament. And that draft agreement ties the United Kingdom into a customs union with the European Union. We call the Irish backstop, and sometimes the backstop becomes the first stop. So therefore, for me, as somebody who was the Vice Chairman of the Conservative Party, I had to go around the country and speak to people and say, hey, the Conservative Party policy is clear. We'll be coming out of the single market, we'll be coming out of the customs union. And so when you have a draft withdrawal agreement pushed forward by the Prime Minister, which keeps us in the single market and customs union, which then means that we can't have those fantastic, great trade deals with our partners like the United States. Our biggest trading partners around the world are the United States, Australia, China. And we need to be in a position that we're able to take that forward. But the draft withdrawal agreement, when it came in, meant that we were still tied in to regulatory alignment with the European Union. But look, it gets even worse than that. You know, sovereignty. You know, United Kingdom should be able to be masters of its own sovereignty. But under the backstop, if you were to enter the backstop, if you can't agree in that transition period of trade deal, then you're stuck in a backstop. But you know what? You can't come out of a backstop without the permission of the European Unions. Well, how does that work? So I think for us, it's now, the Prime Minister said she's going to go and look at seeing what further concessions she can get from the European partners before we go back in January to vote on this. But look, I'm being completely clear with you. If the backstop stays in the withdrawal agreement, then I think it's going to be very difficult for the Prime Minister to get this through, irrespective of what assurances are. Assurances are assurances, but you've got to look at the treaty. And that's why I think it's going to be very challenging for the Prime Minister. But look, hey, I want the Prime Minister to succeed at every level. So I want to see what the assurances she gets, but the treaty must remove the backstop scenario.
The U.S. ambassador to Britain, though, has been very candid that that the U.S. at least a trade deal with Britain over this is not looking very likely if there's no change.
Well, that's right, and I think that's what citizens in the UK voted for, is to be able to have that kind of bilateral trading arrangement. We'd like to have the first free trade agreement with a country in Europe on immediately after the March leave of Britain from the EU. This is endemic, Jessi, I think, of what I hear when I travel in Europe and talk to other countries besides my friends in the United Kingdom. The European Commission, the European Parliament have gone a step too far. And they've created unrest among the citizens of Europe, not just in the United Kingdom, which voted to leave because of it, but you can see that in Germany, you see it in Italy, you see it in the Central European countries that were formerly part of the Soviet Empire. And this has created anxiety inside Europe. And in my view, it would be a great lesson to go back to Brussels and say, why can't you reform the EU and maintain the best of the common practices in trade and transport and the agreements that people have made in this informal assembly of the common market and lay off the next level of essentially intrusion into the sovereignty of each of these countries. That's a big challenge for Europeans, I think.
What happens if there's no deal come March? That's the deadline.
Well, look, I think if there is no deal, I think the words of our Prime Minister were very clear. A no deal is better than a bad deal. And I think on that basis, we have to look at all options, and our government is preparing for all options. And one of those options is to have a clean break, to go out and operate on World Trade Organization rules and terms, and 160 countries around the world are doing that, having those fantastic trading relationships with the United States and other countries around the world. Well, look, you know, before I resigned as the Vice Chairman of the Conservative Party, I was also the government trade envoy for an emerging market. And those emerging markets were lining up to do trade deals for us. So we know that they want to do it. So, you know, for me, it's, look, I want to get the best trading deal, you know, with our European partners. But if not, we then should be in a position to say, look, we can be prepared to go out on a clean break scenario and operate on World Trade Organization rules, not just simply on trade, but the words of our Metropolitan Police Commissioner, the Senior Police Commissioner, said the country we shared the most intelligence with on security is the United States. And across the world, we work and share intelligence with partners around the world to keep our country safe. So whether it's trade, on security, I think if there is no deal, we can make a real success of it and have that great international approach with our key partners and stakeholders.
So there's no quick answer to this, and I'm sure that this is a $100 million question too, but just how do you make the U.S. and the UK happy so this bilateral trade agreement can happen? What's next?
I believe that should there be a clean break and a Brexit approved by the Parliament, that the U.S. will put a priority of having a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom commencing as soon as possible after March 2019.
Okay. And then even though the shutdown is still going on at the nation's capital across our country, of course, there's still a lot of movement to be had, namely in Syria. I know the president made a lot of comments just this past week that sent shockwaves throughout allies, our military, what have you. He said that the troops are coming home because, you know, we've won against ISIS. Now, he has watered down his plans for an immediate pullout from Syria. He's retracted a little bit. You said you opposed the president's decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. What did you think of those comments about Syria?
Well, I was pleased that he had second thoughts about the immediacy of the pullout. There are three key components in Syria. One, and the most important, we want to block Iranian intrusion into Syria, which threatens our allies in the region. And clearly, by pulling our people out of Syria precipitously, we open up the Damascus to Baghdad road and turn it over to the Iranians. Secondly, our intelligence tells us there are about 30,000 to 40,000 Daesh, ISIS fighters still in the lower Euphrates Valley, right at the Iraq border with Syria. And finally, you have the Kurds in northeast Syria along the Turkish border that have cleared that area. Those three areas cannot just be immediately turned over without a plan. So my criticism of the president's decision was, what's the plan along the Turkish border to continue the fight against ISIS in the lower Euphrates and keep the Tanif base, our base at Tanif in southern Syria, to block continued Iranian incursion? So the fact that he says he's thinking about delaying that immediate withdrawal and having a plan, that's exactly what we should have done, and I hope we can do that in conjunction with our allies in France and the UK particularly, and our other regional allies, to make sure this is done properly. Turkey alone can't in any way carry the fight to Daesh, ISIS. They are along the border, they can be effective along the Turkish border, but their principal mission has been to essentially kill our ally, the Peshmerga, the Kurds in northeast Syria. So this is a very complicated area. I invite you to.
Yeah, I did see Britain even respond to Trump's comments.
Well, let me make it very clear. The war against ISIS Daesh is a global coalition in international war. So I want to know if the president consulted with all the key international stakeholders in his decision to pull out of Syria. But let me make this point. Before I was a member of parliament, for 8 years, I was an advisor to Benazir Bhutto, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, who lost her life to an act of terror and campaigned for democracy all her life. So I know the region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Middle East fairly well. And what I would say to the international community, look, let's learn from the past. We messed up the end game in 1989 in Afghanistan. You know, the Russians were defeated. Everybody walked away. a vacuum was created. It's filled in by the Taliban, the Al-Qaeda, and the challenge that we know that we had around the world after that came in. And we should not repeat those mistakes now in Syria. The president says Daesh, ISIS is defeated. It is not defeated. It is still very much there. And what I would say, and I said it to my prime minister at the time, you cannot defeat Daesh, ISIS militarily. You have to defeat the idea, the ideology, the appeal, which is sucking in thousands of individuals from around the world. It sucked in 800 British nationals to fight in Syria for this murderous, barbaric organization. So simply walking away militarily does not solve the solution. Firstly, they're still very much there, and it will then create a vacuum which will be filled in by the Iranians, a vacuum that would then lead to a sectarian war between the Sunnis and the Shiites, which is very much there. And also, let's look at it. What happened? How did Daesh, ISIS come about? It came about due to the persecution of the Sunnis in the Anbar province. You know, after Iraq, the transition, you had a sectarian war which led then to the creation and uprise of Daesh. So now, if you're going to just walk away, you're going to create a bloodbath between Sunnis, between Shiites and the Sunnis even more. So I would say this is a daft decision.
And I would argue, too, this is exactly what Trump as a candidate criticized President Obama about, what many of us in the House criticized President Obama about, which was precipitously pulling out of Iraq, not creating the partnership forces of status of forces agreement that prevented this kind of activity. And the same is true in Afghanistan. When you signal you're going to pull out, this is what President Trump criticized Obama for, you're opening up to your enemies, Assad's regime, the Russians, the Taliban in Afghanistan. Good, we're going to have our way in this territory in just a few weeks. So that's why I think planning is critical and a strategy for completing the fight against ISIS is essential, but also protecting refugees along the border and preventing further Iranian incursion into Syria.
And what it does then do, the other side effect of this is that those who stand with us at difficult times, like the Free Syrian Army, you know, we said we would back the Free Syrian Army, the international community, but when the tough got going, we, the international community, walked away from them. And whereas the Assad's allies stood by him, and it sends the message to people out there that when the tough gets going, you know, the international partners like the United States or the United Kingdom, they walk away and the Russians and the Iranians will stick with you. It's a wrong thing to do. And you've got to then ask the question, the end game, who wins from this? The Russians win this? And why are the Russians in Syria? They're in Syria because we messed up in Crimea. We did not check them. You know, so the Russians then said, okay, let's go to Syria. It was the dithering, indecisive action by President Obama at the time of not taking firm action with international partners to check the Russians in Crimea. Then they ended up in Syria. And now I would say, you ask the question, who wins? Who wins? Iran wins. They want to increase their presence from Syria and Iraq to wider region. And I think that is very concerning, but I welcome what President Trump is doing to check Iran on the nuclear deal. You know, my government does not agree with the position by President Trump, but there's many parliamentarians in my country who say what your country and the President Trump is doing to say that the nuclear deal should be tied into addressing Iran's behavior. That the President is absolutely spot on, and he has many members of parliament who support him on that. But this decision, I think you ask yourself, who wins? Iranians, Russians, and also you ask the question, the Daesh win in this, and I think it makes our world a far unstable position, which we don't want.
Gentlemen, we covered a lot of ground here, but since it is the last day of 2018, also wanted to ask you too, as far as from local to international politics, what would you say your worst and best of 2018 would be? I guess we could start with the bad.
Yeah, well, the worst was not getting a compromise on our immigration and border security issue earlier during the year when Senator Schumer shut the government down over it in the first quarter. That was such a great opportunity for President Trump, Democrats in the Senate and the House to come together and but take a big step forward towards better border security and a better American immigration system. So that's my biggest disappointment from this year from a public policy point of view. The best was I appreciate the citizens of Little Rock and the surrounding 6 counties, the 7 counties of the 2nd District voting to send me back for a 3rd term in Congress. I appreciate their trust and faith in me, and I'll work hard to live up to their expectations.
There you go. 2018 was definitely a busy year here, but I'm sure for you as well.
It was, and you know the difficult point and the disappointing was that as we're inching close to delivering on the public mandate and leaving the European Union, was to then see in November a draft withdrawal agreement brought back by the Prime Minister from Brussels, which tied us in further to European alignment rather than delivering on the public mandate of ensuring that the United Kingdom can go out there and achieve and deliver on the issue of sovereignty. So that was very disappointing. But you know, 2019, we still haven't dealt with this issue, so I hope we can address it and deliver on the public mandate and ensure that Brexit is dealt with in line of what the people of Great Britain had voted for the sovereignty of the British, for the United Kingdom to be masters of their own destiny on that. The good side, well, I have a private member's bill on cats going through Parliament at the moment. It's a private member's bill. I love cats. I love French's two cats.
I'm trying to think of like a pun, and I just can't go there. I just can't do it.
And Teddy. So I put forward a bill. Look, you know, we have 11 million cats in the United Kingdom, and they're part of people's homes. And so as a backbench member of Parliament, I went to my local animal welfare charity, and they said, look, cats should be microchipped because sometimes when they get lost, you can't reunite them with their rightful owner. And then the other thing is if they get hurt after an accident, individuals in the United Kingdom should not have to report it because they're free roaming. That is wrong. In New York, you do it. You do it great over here. If you hit a cat, even though they're free roaming, they're protected by law. So I'm saying in the United Kingdom, we should do the same thing. Learn from our American partners when it comes to animal welfare here.
I think we got some new cat lovers watching Capitol View.
Well, here we are.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, Jessica.
Have a happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.